Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Erik Johanson, a teacher with LSAT Demon, and joining me today, LSAT Demon student Tim, who it's always bittersweet when students crush the test and no longer need us, go off. But no, always happy when I can say that you are in line for a success story podcast interview and don't need to see you in class anymore. So Tim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm all right. Thank you for having me. It's a bit surreal being on this after listening to the podcast for going on like around over a year. So it's great to be here.
Did you imagine yourself being on this podcast?
Um, at first I didn't, because I would see people go from 150 to 180, and I'm like, oh shoot, when I was stuck in the 150s. But eventually, yeah, I was looking forward to it.
Cool. So tell me about your own journey. You started where?
I started at a 143 diagnostic and ended up with a 173.
Just a easy breezy 30-point improvement. Nicely done. How long did that take?
It took me around, I'd say a year and a half.
Of consistent study every day?
I'd say so, but I put an asterisk on that because I think I could have gotten there a lot sooner, if my studying was more productive. I joined the Demon in February of this year, and I think that really boosted how fast I was going to make my progress.
Yeah, what do you mean by productive? Like what became productive about your study, or what wasn't productive about your study before?
So before, I think I fell into the trick that a lot of people do when they first start the LSAT is they'll just take a question just to take a question, or do a question just to do a question, or do a test just to get a score, spin that roulette.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh my God, I got I got a 160 this time, and not really learn really anything, at least in my case.
Mm.
And at least anything substantial.
Hyper focused on the score and not so much what you were learning.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. So what flipped the switch, or what did it look, how did it look different for you to be studying in a way that focused on the learning instead of the score?
It really started when I found the Demon, and the biggest piece of advice that really struck me was, don't try to answer every question in a section. At first I thought, man, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
so that sounds so counterproductive, I mean, I'm going to have way more answers wrong than I would have if I didn't. But the benefit of that is, yeah, at first your score might go down, but the answers or the questions that you are answering, you are genuinely learning them. And the questions that you give the time to answer and you get them wrong, those are little puzzles that you get to solve. Those are little checkpoints that actually further your progress.
Mm. Did it take you a while to actually embrace that and switch to the method of not finishing sections?
You bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right after I was like, okay, I'm going to take my first practice test with this mantra. I left maybe two questions to guess,
Yeah.
end of each section, still thinking I'm taking my time. But eventually I noticed I still wasn't learning as much as I'd like to. So going forward with that, each question I didn't push past it. I didn't save it. I didn't mark it. I sat there until I felt 100% confident that that was the answer I was going to put. Um, and if I got it right, then awesome. I understood at least that question. Or if I felt iffy about it, or if I got it wrong, that was key to me. And that was perfect because it actually gave me the opportunity to realize, hey, you don't understand something here. Let's change that.
And you saw your accuracy on the ones that you attempted go way up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And not at first, or yes, at first, especially on the easier ones, but uh, concepts like confusing sufficient for necessary, part to whole flaw. I didn't really understand that at all until I developed this mantra because, the test is a skills test. It's testing, how well you can apply your knowledge on these skills. And you can't do that without sitting down and learning it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember when you actually did fully embrace the accuracy first approach and committed to not finishing sections? Do you remember how many questions that reduced you down to? Like, how many questions were you actually finishing when you were doing it right?
Yeah, yeah. At first I was answering around um 12 questions a section.
That's a big shift from finishing sections to suddenly you're changing your approach to only doing about half of the section.
Yeah, yeah. And, it was scary at first. And I would talk to people about it who were also studying, and they would see, a noticeable score decline because I was around in the 160s, mid 160s,
Mm.
um, score at the time. And, at that time, doing only that amount, I was scoring around 150, maybe even in the 140s, maybe.
Mm.
But the thing is I was genuinely learning the questions that I was doing, and understanding this test and realizing, hey, the more I understand it, the faster I'm going to be on the ones I understand. Therefore, the more questions I'm going to be able to answer without really trying to push myself.
So then when did you notice that speed naturally coming in? You just gradually getting to one more question, one more question.
Not gonna lie, pretty fast. I because this was the first time I was genuinely trying to learn it, learn the
Yeah.
concepts I'm answering. And I think I got to a good spot at around 17 to 20 questions after like a month or two of following that mantra. And that was when I was able to score into the 170s. So my biggest piece of advice for people who think that this strategy is counterintuitive, it might seem like that if you're looking at it from the scores perspective, but if you're if you're able to teach a question, one more question every day, or if you're able to understand one more question every day, then you're making progress. Don't worry about the score.
Totally agree. Um, was there anything else that at any point in your process surprised you, whether it was when you came to the demon or when you just started, like stuff that you thought was true about the LSAT, which you realized, oh, wait a minute, nope, that was a myth. We had to bust that one.
Um, I think I think the biggest one was um well, there's two. One smaller one, there's one thing doing 10 questions in 10 in the first 10 minutes. No.
Yeah.
You know, take as much time as you need, um, especially when you're practicing, you know, um, because that's going to translate into the test. Um, and the second one is one thing I would think a lot is, oh man, the LSAT is just full of convoluted language. It's not, it's not common sense. When you think about the LSAT in the way of, okay, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to look at this question, I'm going to dumb it down. It really becomes just a common sense test. Like the example Nathan uses all the time for confusing for sufficient for necessary. Los Angeles is in California. You know, John lives in California, therefore he lives in Los Angeles. You don't need to say diagram for that.
Right.
You know, and I think once you sit down and you really give yourself the time to dumb it down for yourself, and that applies to everybody, the test really just becomes easy and common knowledge.
Yeah. So get into that a little bit more. How is it that you make it easy besides slowing down? Because if it's not arcane theory and if it is common sense, then why is it challenging for those studying to reach the 160s or the 170s? Like what is the challenge that you saw and how do you overcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, one, you need to give yourself the time to let yourself learn how this test goes because, speaking from experience, it's especially intimidating, at first. Especially, the last reading comp passage, like, of course. But I think going off of that, once you give yourself the time to understand and recognize the patterns in this test, you realize it's all testing the same stuff, the same concepts. There's only so many flaws you can know on logical reasoning. There's only so many questions you can do to realize, oh, hey, that's part the whole flaw, you know? So I think it's really just being patient with yourself and understanding and at the same time unforgiving with the questions that you get wrong. I think a lot of the time I fell victim to this where I would see a question, get frustrated that I got it wrong, shut my laptop off, whatever, you know. But that's just completely going against all of your effort. And I think if you're unforgiving with the answers that you get wrong, or even that you're iffy on, and you mark it for review and truly understand it until you have that click moment where you're thinking, "Oh my God, how is this even a debate in my head?"
Mm-hmm.
That's the true way to get to progression.
Yeah. I like that word, unforgiving, but I think it's useful to clarify that it's not, at least the way I think I'm hearing you, it's not that you don't forgive yourself or that you're beating yourself up for getting it wrong, but you're not letting yourself off the hook in your review process. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, you should. I mean, everybody's new to this test. Everybody's still learning it. I mean, I got a 173. I didn't get perfect, so I realized that there's still questions that you're not going to understand every day. Even a 180 score, there's still going to be questions that trip them up. I mean, be unforgiving to the question. You shouldn't. I mean, maybe I'm thinking about it from a competitive standpoint, but you shouldn't let that question beat you, you
Yeah.
like I wouldn't want that. And forgive yourself for getting it wrong. You're still learning, everybody is, but don't forgive the question.
Great. Oh, I love that. No, that's a good way of putting it. You were working while you were studying, or were you in school?
I started studying while I was in school, but I wanted to make my GPA my main priority, so I didn't really
Good.
prioritize the LSAT that much. But once I graduated and I started working, I gave an hour every day to the LSAT. And then, yeah.
We have a lot of students who are working while they're studying. I worked while I studied, and people who struggle to find the balance and know when to set aside time. So, what was your strategy for making sure you carved out a solid hour for the LSAT?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it was a bit difficult to have one solid hour every day. So I would do bits and pieces besides if I'm taking a section or if it was once in a while I wanted to take a full length practice test that would be on the weekend. But during the week I would just find little nuggets of time that I could study. And I think the best piece of advice I have for that or finding the time to do it would be make it fun for yourself. Coming from a logic games enthusiast and really sad that it's gone, that was the most fun to me. If I was on the bus or if I was, on the plane even, I'd bring like a little logic game booklet.
Mm-hmm.
But logical reasoning or reading comp even, make it fun for yourself. And I know this is said time and time again, but it's like a puzzle, A lot of people play the New York Times puzzles every day. It's no different. It's when you're just drilling and stuff and you're trying to understand it, think of it as a game.
It totally is. Yeah. Was there anything that at any point didn't feel like a game or that you dreaded?
Oh, reading comp.
Yeah.
Reading comp 100%. Yeah. Like, it took me a long time to develop, um, you know, for me in reading comp to get on talking terms. Um, uh, because at first I just thought, a lot of the answers were subjective, you know, a lot more than logical reasoning, because logical reasoning, there's a lot more set in stone rules, whereas a main point question or an inference question, obviously the LSAT wouldn't be a thing, you know, or a reasonable use to test someone's, you know, aptitude if it was like that, you know. And I think you need to understand that there is one right answer and there's four wrong answers, and it's up to you to find it and understand it yourself. So yeah. And the passages are pretty interesting once you learn to love it.
There are some that surprise me with how interesting I find them. Ones that I might be resistant to at first because it seems like a topic I would not care about, and by the end of it, I've got another tab open looking at the Wikipedia article.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, and you can tell your friends what you learned the other day. You know, I remember it was one about like corn growing in Ireland, or like the maize.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my friends about it, you know, being all enthusiastic, you know. But it's just something new to learn every day. So,
Totally.
I like to learn, so why not be excited about it?
So what's next for you now that the LSAT's out of your life? What are you doing with this extra time that you've got?
Well, I finished up my applications, so I sent them out, and I'm just waiting now. And yeah, and I'm looking forward to taking this time off. And yeah, and for me, and maybe the LSAT will stay in my life. Maybe it won't,
Excellent.
but yeah.
I won't ask you to betray any preferences for an individual law school because you've still got applications out there. But generally speaking, what are you looking forward to about law school?
I'm looking forward to learning full time again.
Mm.
I think we take that for granted, you know, in our upbringing and our childhood. And of course we learn, you know, at our jobs, of course. But I think learning and dedicating, you know, yourself to that, especially to a topic that you know, I hope everybody listening to this, you know, enjoys, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the law. I'm really excited for that, and learning about how the rules we set affect our lives. So,
Yeah, I agree. It can be invigorating to be in a classroom.
you know, and getting cold called. I'm kind of excited for that. I don't know why. I know it's scary, but I kind of just want to get it out of the way. And,
Sure.
you know,
Be
I don't know.
unforgiving with your professor's cold calls.
Exactly.
There we go. Awesome. Any final pieces of advice that you would want to share with current listeners before we wrap things up?
Um, I would just say take your time. You know, the LSAT is only as powerful as you let it be over you. It's a test that you can learn. It's a test that you can make easy for yourself. And as long as you stick through it, you can get the score you want.
Tim, thank you so much for coming on. Huge well done to you on that 30-point improvement and that 173. Stay in touch. Let us know how the applications go. We want to know where you end up.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.